Right now, inside your body, something very important is happening, and you probably have no idea. Your cells are deciding whether to store fat or burn it. That decision is not random. It is controlled by signals, hormonal signals, metabolic signals, survival signals that have been shaped by millions of years of evolution. And the most powerful signal of all is incredibly simple: whether you are eating or not. For most of human history, the human body lived in a metabolic rhythm that modern life has almost completely erased. A rhythm of feeding and fasting. Food would arrive. Energy would be stored. Then hours or sometimes days would pass before food appeared again, forcing the body to tap into its reserves. That cycle built the human metabolism. But today, that rhythm has been replaced by something completely different. A constant stream of food. Breakfast, immediately after waking. Coffee loaded with sugar. Mid-morning snacks. Lunch. Afternoon snacks. Dinner. Dessert. Sometimes even a snack before bed. From a metabolic perspective, this pattern creates one critical problem. The body almost never enters a true fasting state. And when the body never enters a fasting state, one hormone remains elevated most of the day: insulin. Insulin is often misunderstood as simply a blood sugar hormone. But metabolically, insulin has a far more powerful role. It is the body's storage signal. When insulin rises, the body receives a clear message: energy is available, store it. When insulin falls, the body receives a different message: food is not coming, use stored energy. In other words, insulin controls the switch between fat storage and fat burning, and modern eating patterns keep that switch locked in one position: storage. To understand why fasting can be so powerful, we first need to step back and look at how the body manages energy in the first place. Every time you eat, nutrients enter the bloodstream. Glucose rises. Insulin rises in response. That insulin allows cells to absorb glucose for immediate energy. But here is the critical point. Your body cannot burn and store large amounts of energy at the same time. If more energy arrives than the body needs right now, that excess must be stored. A small portion of energy can be stored as glycogen, a form of carbohydrate stored primarily in the liver and muscles. Glycogen acts as a short-term energy reserve, but glycogen storage capacity is limited. The average adult can only store roughly 1 day's worth of energy in glycogen. Once those stores are full, the body must store the remaining energy somewhere else. That place is body fat. Fat is not a mistake. It is not a flaw in metabolism. It is actually the most efficient long-term energy storage system the human body has. Gram for gram, fat stores more than twice the energy of carbohydrates. And during human evolution, this system was essential for survival. When food was plentiful, the body stored energy as fat. When food became scarce, the body accessed that stored fat and used it as fuel. This ability allowed humans to survive periods of famine, migration, seasonal scarcity, and unpredictable food supply. In other words, fat storage evolved as a survival advantage. But for that system to work properly, something else also had to exist: periods without food. Without fasting, the body would constantly store energy without ever needing to use it. And that is exactly the situation modern society has created. Anthropological evidence suggests that early humans rarely ate continuously throughout the day. Hunter-gatherer societies did not have refrigerators, freezers, or food delivery services. Food availability was inconsistent. Some days food was abundant. Other days it was not available at all. Even after agriculture developed and civilizations grew more structured, eating patterns remained relatively moderate. For thousands of years, most people ate 2 or 3 meals per day. The idea that humans need to eat every 2 to 3 hours is extremely recent. And biologically, it makes very little sense. Think about it this way. If the human body truly required food every 2 hours to survive, sleep would be impossible. You would need to wake up in the middle of the night to eat. But that never happens. Humans naturally fast for many hours every night. That overnight fast is actually one of the most important metabolic resets the body performs. During sleep, insulin levels gradually fall. As insulin drops, the body slowly shifts away from burning incoming calories and begins using stored energy instead. But modern habits often shorten this fasting window dramatically. Late-night snacks, sugary drinks, eating immediately after waking. Instead of allowing the body 12 to 14 hours without food, many people compress that fasting window down to 8 hours or less. And when that happens, something important disappears. The fat-burning phase of metabolism. Imagine your body as having an energy pantry. Every time you eat, food is added to that pantry. Storing energy is not a problem. The body was designed to do that. The problem occurs when the pantry is constantly being filled but rarely emptied. This is what happens when insulin rarely falls low enough to allow fat burning. Over time, the result is predictable. Energy storage gradually exceeds energy use. Fat accumulates. Blood sugar regulation begins to deteriorate. And metabolic diseases such as obesity and type 2 diabetes begin to develop. Fasting works not because it is extreme, but because it restores something the body was always designed to do. It restores the other half of metabolism. When you stop eating for several hours, insulin levels fall. As insulin declines, the body transitions into a different metabolic state. First, glycogen stored in the liver begins to break down to maintain blood glucose. But glycogen is limited. Once glycogen levels begin to decline, the body activates a deeper metabolic program, fat burning. Stored fat begins to break down into fatty acids. These fatty acids are transported into cells and burned inside mitochondria to produce energy. This transition is sometimes called the metabolic switch, and it represents the moment when the body stops depending on incoming calories and starts using its own stored fuel. But fasting triggers more than just fat burning. As fasting periods extend, the body activates powerful cellular repair systems. One of the most important of these systems is called autophagy. Autophagy literally means self-eating, but the name can be misleading. What the body is actually doing is cleaning and recycling damaged cellular material. Proteins become damaged over time. Cellular structures wear out. Viruses and bacteria leave debris behind. During fasting, the body increases its cellular recycling systems. Damaged components are broken down and reused to build new molecules. In effect, fasting activates a biological cleanup crew. And the longer fasting continues, the stronger this repair process becomes. To understand why fasting changes metabolism so dramatically, we need to look at what actually happens inside the body over time when food stops coming in. Because fasting is not a single metabolic event. It is a sequence of metabolic transitions. The body moves through different stages depending on how long it has been since the last meal. Each stage activates different biological systems designed to maintain energy, balance, and survival. The first phase begins almost immediately after eating. For several hours after a meal, the body remains in what scientists call the fed state. During this period, insulin levels are elevated, and the body is primarily focused on processing incoming nutrients. Glucose from the meal enters the bloodstream. Insulin helps transport that glucose into cells. Some of that energy is used immediately, while the rest is stored. If glycogen stores in the liver and muscles are not yet full, a portion of that glucose will be converted into glycogen. But if those stores are already near capacity, excess glucose will be converted into fat. This is the body's natural storage system. During this stage, fat burning is minimal because insulin suppresses the enzymes responsible for releasing stored fat. In other words, when insulin is high, the body prefers to store energy rather than burn it. Several hours later, the body gradually transitions into the post-absorptive state. This usually occurs roughly 8 to 12 hours after the last meal, depending on the size and composition of the meal. At this point, most of the nutrients from the previous meal have already been processed. Insulin levels begin to decline. As insulin falls, another hormone begins to rise, glucagon. Glucagon has the opposite effect of insulin. Instead of promoting storage, glucagon signals the body to release stored energy. The liver responds by breaking down glycogen and releasing glucose into the bloodstream to maintain stable blood sugar levels. This process is called glycogenolysis. For many people, this overnight phase represents the only time during the day when their body briefly accesses stored energy. But glycogen stores are limited. Once glycogen begins to decline significantly, the body enters a deeper metabolic stage. This stage is often referred to as the fat-burning phase of fasting. Typically, this transition becomes more noticeable around 12 to 16 hours after the last meal. At this point, insulin levels are low enough to allow the release of stored fat from adipose tissue. Fat cells begin releasing fatty acids into the bloodstream. These fatty acids travel to tissues such as muscles and the liver, where they are used as fuel. Inside cells, these fatty acids are transported into mitochondria and converted into energy through a process known as beta oxidation. At the same time, the liver begins converting some fatty acids into molecules called ketones. Ketones serve as an alternative fuel source for the brain and other organs when glucose availability declines. This metabolic flexibility, switching between glucose and fat as fuel, is a key feature of a healthy metabolism. However, many people today have lost much of this flexibility. Constant eating keeps insulin elevated and prevents the body from regularly activating its fat-burning systems. Over time, this leads to a metabolic pattern where the body becomes highly dependent on incoming carbohydrates for energy. When that happens, even short periods without food can produce strong hunger signals, fatigue, and cravings. But something remarkable happens when fasting becomes a regular metabolic pattern. The body gradually relearns how to access stored fuel efficiently. Fat burning becomes easier, energy levels become more stable, and hunger signals often become less intense. For many individuals practicing intermittent fasting, the first noticeable change is not weight loss. It is metabolic stability. Instead of experiencing energy crashes between meals, the body becomes capable of smoothly transitioning between fuel sources. This metabolic stability is one reason why many people report improved focus and mental clarity during fasting. As fasting continues beyond 18 to 24 hours, additional metabolic systems begin to activate. Growth hormone levels rise significantly. Growth hormone plays an important role in protecting lean muscle mass while the body is using fat for energy. In other words, fasting does not automatically lead to muscle loss, as is often feared. Instead, the body activates mechanisms designed to preserve muscle tissue while increasing fat utilization. At the same time, insulin levels drop to some of their lowest levels of the day. Lower insulin improves insulin sensitivity, meaning cells become more responsive to insulin when food is eventually consumed again. This is one reason why fasting can help improve metabolic conditions such as insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. But one of the most fascinating biological processes activated during longer fasting periods is autophagy. Autophagy functions as a cellular recycling program. Cells constantly produce damaged proteins, worn-out mitochondria, and other dysfunctional components. Normally, these components accumulate slowly over time. But during fasting, the body increases its internal repair systems. Damaged cellular components are broken down and reused to create new molecules. In essence, the body begins cleaning house at the cellular level. This process is believed to play a role in protecting against aging, neurodegenerative diseases, metabolic disorders, and possibly even certain forms of cancer. Importantly, autophagy does not switch on instantly. It increases gradually as fasting continues. Short fasting periods may initiate mild autophagy activity, but longer fasting periods appear to amplify this process significantly. This is why many metabolic researchers believe that periodic longer fasts, beyond the standard daily fasting window, may provide additional biological benefits. However, the majority of metabolic improvements for most people can still be achieved through relatively simple fasting patterns. Time-restricted eating, such as a 6-hour fasting window and an 8-hour eating window, allows the body to enter the fat-burning stage every day. This alone can restore much of the metabolic rhythm that modern lifestyles disrupted. But for individuals experiencing weight loss plateaus or severe insulin resistance, longer fasting periods may sometimes be used strategically to accelerate metabolic adaptation. At this point, an obvious question emerges. If fasting activates fat burning, improves metabolic flexibility, and triggers cellular repair processes like autophagy, how long should a fast actually be? The answer is not the same for everyone. Fasting is not a one-size-fits-all strategy. The optimal fasting duration depends on several factors, including metabolic health, body composition, insulin sensitivity, and individual goals. However, most fasting protocols fall into three general categories: time-restricted fasting, 1 meal a day, and extended fasting. Each of these activates similar biological mechanisms, but at different intensities. The most widely practiced form of fasting today is time-restricted eating, often referred to as the 16-to-8 protocol. In this pattern, individuals fast for roughly 16 hours and eat within an 8-hour window. For example, someone might eat their first meal at noon and finish dinner by 8 p.m. From a metabolic perspective, this simple adjustment already restores a large portion of the natural fasting rhythm that modern lifestyles have disrupted. 16 hours without food allows insulin levels to fall long enough for the body to access stored glycogen and begin mobilizing fat. For many individuals, especially those who are only moderately overweight, this alone can produce noticeable improvements in metabolic health. Fat loss begins gradually. Blood sugar regulation improves. Energy levels become more stable throughout the day. In fact, research shows that the majority of people can achieve meaningful weight loss and metabolic improvements simply by limiting their eating window. But not everyone experiences the same response. Some individuals reach a point where progress slows or even stops. This phenomenon is commonly known as a weight loss plateau. And metabolically, it makes perfect sense. The body is highly adaptive. When calorie intake decreases or energy expenditure increases, the body often compensates by reducing metabolic rate and becoming more efficient with energy. This adaptation is part of the body's survival system. If the body senses prolonged energy restriction, it attempts to preserve energy stores. In practical terms, this means that the same fasting protocol that initially produced weight loss may eventually become less effective. At this stage, many people mistakenly assume that fasting has stopped working. In reality, the body has simply adapted. To continue progressing, the metabolic signal must change. One way to create that change is by increasing the duration of fasting. This leads to the second major fasting pattern, 1 meal a day, often called OMAD. In the OMAD approach, the daily eating window becomes extremely short. Instead of eating over 8 hours, food intake is compressed into a single meal. This typically results in a fasting period of approximately 22 to 23 hours per day. The metabolic effect of OMAD can be significantly stronger than time-restricted eating. Because the fasting window is longer, insulin remains low for a greater portion of the day. Fat burning becomes more consistent, and the body spends more time in a state of metabolic flexibility. Many individuals who experience plateaus with 16-to-8 fasting find that OMAD reactivates fat loss. However, OMAD is not necessary for everyone. For individuals who lose weight easily, OMAD may actually produce excessive weight loss. It can also be difficult for some people to consume adequate nutrition in a single meal. For these reasons, OMAD is often used strategically rather than continuously. Beyond OMAD lies the third category of fasting: extended fasting. Extended fasting typically refers to fasting periods lasting 24 hours or longer. Common durations include 36 hours, 42 hours, or 48 hours. At first glance, this may sound extreme, but when broken down practically, extended fasting often becomes more manageable than people expect. Consider a simple example. If someone finishes dinner on Monday evening and does not eat again until Wednesday morning, they have completed roughly a 3-6-hour fast. Interestingly, this fasting window includes 2 full nights of sleep, which significantly reduces the amount of waking time spent fasting. Many people discover that once they become comfortable with shorter fasting windows like 16 hours, transitioning to occasional longer fasts becomes easier. Extended fasting produces several metabolic effects. First, insulin remains low for a prolonged period, allowing the body to access deeper fat stores. Second, glycogen stores are depleted more completely. And third, cellular repair processes such as autophagy become more strongly activated. This is why extended fasting is sometimes used to break stubborn weight loss plateaus. By creating a stronger metabolic signal, the body is pushed to access stored energy more aggressively. However, extended fasting is generally not necessary on a daily basis. In fact, many metabolic researchers recommend using it occasionally rather than constantly. For example, some individuals may perform a longer fast once or twice per month as a way to reset metabolic processes. Others may experiment with longer fasts a few times per year. The key principle is flexibility. Short fasting windows can maintain metabolic rhythm. Longer fasting periods can be used strategically when deeper metabolic change is needed. Ultimately, the goal of fasting is not simply to avoid food. The goal is to restore balance between energy storage and energy use. When that balance returns, the body regains its ability to regulate weight, blood sugar, and metabolic health naturally. Up to this point, we have explored how fasting changes metabolism, shifts the body from fat storage to fat burning, and improves metabolic flexibility. But there is another dimension to fasting that extends far beyond weight loss: cellular repair. Every second of your life, billions of chemical reactions are occurring inside your body. Cells are constantly producing proteins, enzymes, hormones, and structural components that allow tissues and organs to function properly. But like any complex system, cellular machinery gradually accumulates damage. Proteins misfold. Mitochondria become less efficient. Fragments of damaged cellular material begin to accumulate inside cells. Under normal conditions, the body performs a limited amount of maintenance and repair. However, when nutrients are constantly available, the body prioritizes growth over repair. Energy is directed toward building new molecules rather than cleaning up damaged ones. Fasting changes that priority. When food is absent and insulin levels fall, the body shifts its internal programming from growth to maintenance. One of the most important repair mechanisms activated during fasting is autophagy. The term autophagy literally means self-eating, but a more accurate description would be cellular recycling. During autophagy, cells begin identifying damaged or dysfunctional components and breaking them down into basic molecular building blocks. These building blocks can then be reused to construct new proteins and cellular structures. This process serves several critical biological functions. First, it removes damaged cellular material that could otherwise interfere with normal cell function. Second, it improves the efficiency of mitochondria, the structures responsible for generating cellular energy. And third, it strengthens the body's internal defense systems by helping remove pathogens and damaged cells. In many ways, autophagy acts as the body's internal quality control system. However, like many biological processes, autophagy does not activate instantly. It increases gradually as fasting duration increases. Short fasting periods may initiate a mild increase in cellular cleanup activity, but longer fasting periods appear to amplify the process significantly. Research suggests that deeper autophagy levels may occur somewhere between 24 and 48 hours of fasting, although exact timing varies between individuals. This is one reason why occasional longer fasting periods are sometimes used strategically. They may stimulate deeper cellular repair mechanisms that shorter fasting windows cannot fully activate. Another major benefit of fasting relates to insulin resistance. Insulin resistance occurs when cells gradually become less responsive to insulin signals. As a result, the pancreas must produce larger amounts of insulin to maintain normal blood glucose levels. Over time, this process can lead to chronically elevated insulin levels and eventually contribute to metabolic diseases, such as type 2 diabetes. Fasting helps address this problem from multiple directions. First, fasting lowers insulin levels by reducing the frequency of food intake. Second, fasting forces the body to rely more heavily on stored energy rather than incoming glucose. And third, fasting appears to improve insulin sensitivity, meaning cells respond more effectively to insulin when food is eventually consumed. This is why many individuals with insulin resistance or metabolic syndrome experience significant improvements when fasting protocols are combined with improved nutrition. But perhaps the most intriguing research surrounding fasting involves longevity. Scientists studying aging have long been interested in the relationship between nutrient signaling and lifespan. Several biological pathways associated with aging, such as the mTOR pathway and AMPK signaling, are strongly influenced by nutrient availability. When nutrients are abundant, growth pathways dominate. When nutrients are scarce, repair pathways become more active. This balance between growth and repair appears to play a role in how organisms age. Animal studies have consistently shown that periodic fasting or calorie restriction can extend lifespan in multiple species. While human research is still ongoing, many scientists believe that fasting may help slow certain aspects of biological aging by activating cellular repair processes and improving metabolic health. However, it is important to understand that fasting is not a magic solution. Fasting works best when it is combined with other fundamental health behaviors. Nutrition quality still matters. Sleep still matters. Physical activity still matters. Fasting simply restores a metabolic rhythm that modern lifestyles have disrupted. For most people, a practical and sustainable fasting strategy might look something like this. Maintain a daily fasting window of approximately 14 to 16 hours. Allow the body to regularly access stored energy and activate fat-burning pathways. For individuals seeking greater metabolic change, occasional longer fasting periods, perhaps once or twice per month, may provide additional benefits. And for those interested in deeper metabolic resets or cellular repair processes, longer fasting periods of several days may sometimes be explored under appropriate conditions. Ultimately, fasting is not about deprivation. It is about restoring balance. For thousands of years, the human body evolved under conditions where food availability naturally fluctuated. Periods of abundance were followed by periods of scarcity. The human metabolism was built for this rhythm. When we reintroduce fasting into modern life, we are not doing something extreme. We are simply allowing the body to operate the way it was originally designed. And sometimes, the most powerful health intervention is not adding something new. It is removing something that never belonged there in the first place. Constant eating,